Bob, you and the boys stand guard. Nobody gets through.
Swear the afterlife is so random.
You're that thing from my dream.
Really more nightmare material.
Confronting the unknown, conquering your fears. There's nothing harder. Beetlejuice!
What the f?
Beetlejuice is the newest horror comedy film to hit theaters. It is, of course, the sequel follow-up to the classic 1988 film Beetlejuice, directed by Tim Burton. This film is also directed by Tim Burton and brings back characters from that first movie, like bringing back Michael Keaton as the title character of Beetlejuice, Winona Ryder coming back as Lydia, and Catherine O'Hara coming back as Delia. The movie also introduces new characters to us by giving us Jenna Ortega as Astrid, the daughter of Lydia, bringing in people like Monica Bellucci as Dolores, the scorned ex-wife of Beetlejuice, and we'll get to more of her in a minute, and it brings in Justin Theroux as Rory and Willem Dafoe as Wolf Jackson. Getting into the movie itself, the movie is set many years after the events of that original film, and I mean, you can kind of guess that because Lydia in that film was a teenage girl, and she is now grown up and has a teenage girl of her own. But they don't talk very much. In fact, nobody in the family really talks very much anymore. Delia has her art museum that she is currently trying to cultivate. Lydia has a psychic reality TV show that she runs with her husband Rory, and Astrid is currently in high school, but a tragic event, the father from the first film, has passed away and brings them all back together, back to that original haunted house from the first movie. But the house is not haunted anymore. The ghosts that inhabited that house, well, they have found a loophole and they have found a way to get away, and Beetlejuice seems to be a thing of the past. But Beetlejuice, of course, is not a thing of the past. He is currently running things in the underworld. Well, kind of running things. He's just kind of doing Beetlejuice stuff and doing whatever he wants. I don't know what he was supposed to have happened to him at the end of the first film, but he's getting away with just about everything in the underworld until his scorned ex-wife Dolores, played by Monica Bellucci, shows up. And when she shows up, she is coming for Beetlejuice's head because many years ago, he chopped her up into little pieces, put her in different boxes, and stuck her away in Lost and Found. But those pieces came back together at the beginning of this movie in very Tim Burton fashion, and now she is after him. So he kind of needs help from people on the other side. And back to the other side, while the family is still reeling from the death of their father and sort of coming to terms with everything, you have Jenna Ortega's character of Astrid, who runs into a teenage boy in the town, and they start to have a good relationship, but things are not as they seem, and pretty soon the family needs help from Beetlejuice just as much as Beetlejuice needs help from them. And that is the best synopsis that I can give you going into this film. If that seems like a lot of information, it felt like that in the theater as well, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's talk about my positives and some of my negatives. My first positive for this film is going to be Michael Keaton reprising his role as Beetlejuice. I think he is absolutely fantastic as Beetlejuice. In fact, every time the movie goes back to Beetlejuice is when I was having the most fun with it. He is still his fun self. He hasn't missed a beat, and he's just doing crazy stuff throughout the movie, and nobody can seem to get ahead of him, and I just loved that about this film. Like, anytime it focused on Beetlejuice, I was having a great time. My next positive is going to be the Jenna Ortega storyline in this film. I really liked Astrid and the boy in the town storyline. There are many storylines going on in this movie, many subplots. Each character gets their own plot in this film, but the one that stuck with me the most, the one that I liked the most and wish we had gotten more of, was that Jenna Ortega storyline. I thought that between her and the boy in the town, that had the most horror element to it. I mean, you could say technically Dolores and Beetlejuice had a horror element going on in their storyline, but I really liked the storyline of Astrid and the boy in the town. I thought that one had the most to it, and I wish they had done more with it. And my final positive for this film is going to be the musical number that, of course, they have to lip sync to. This movie has a lot of callbacks in this film from the first movie, and I don't think all of them worked for me, but I liked the musical number where all of the people had to sing along. To me, it worked. It didn't work for my wife. We were going over our positives and negatives of the film together yesterday, and she told me, yeah, that part didn't really work for me, but she didn't really like that in the first movie either, and I don't know, there's just something about that worked for me in the first movie. It worked for me here, and so it's a positive. And that'll lead me to my negatives. My first negative is that there are way too many plots going on in this film at the exact same time, and they really only needed one or two. I really liked the plot with Astrid and the boy in the town, and I enjoyed the plot between Beetlejuice and Dolores, and I think those plots served each other the best best in this movie because Beetlejuice ended up needing help from the humans to get rid of Dolores, and you had the humans needing Beetlejuice's help to fix the problem with Astrid and the boy in the town. And I think if they had focused on those two, it would have been a much better movie, in my opinion. But unfortunately, you have to do something with all these different characters going on, and I listed a lot of people at the beginning of this movie. So you have Lydia and Delia having a storyline, Lydia and Rory having a storyline, Beetlejuice and Lydia having a storyline, Beetlejuice and Rory kind of having a storyline. And of course, you have Astrid and the boy in the town having a storyline, Astrid and Beetlejuice kind of having a storyline. And while we're at it, you throw in Willem Dafoe, who plays Wolf Jackson, who was an actor from the 50s, and his character might have worked had you gotten rid of some of those other subplots, but you just kept throwing him in at these weird, awkward times, and he'd be like, hey, I'm here for a laugh. I'm an actor from the 50s, and I played a detective in the movie, so I'm kind of a detective in the underworld now. And I was like, what are you doing here? So there were just way too many plot lines going on in this movie for me. I wish they had trimmed it back a bit. And since we just talked about Willem Dafoe, I'll make that my next negative. I don't think he was needed in this movie at all. I don't think he was very funny in this movie. I think he was underused in this movie. Like, you've got Willem Dafoe in a crazy, zany horror film. Go all out with him, and they don't seem to do that. He looks the most fake, like his brain injury that he's got, it doesn't look very good. For Tim Burton, not having a character that looks really good was kind of disappointing as well. And so something about his character just feels out of place in this whole film. Like, they cut back to him maybe for runtime, but I didn't see a reason for his character in this movie. And my final negative of this film is the elephant in the room that I feel like I have to address. I thought about leaving it out of this review completely, just judging the movie on the merits that we've already talked about, but I can't let this go. It is, in my opinion, the biggest issue I have with this film, and it is the Jeffrey Jones problem. Now, for those of you who don't know, Jeffrey Jones played the father in the first movie. The first movie came out in 1988, and in 2004, Jeffrey Jones went to jail for having child pictures, we'll say, because this is YouTube, and he himself is a predator that shouldn't be around normal human beings. I don't feel bad saying that. If YouTube censors me for saying that, shame on YouTube, because I don't think predators should be around normal people. That's just my opinion. So with that said, what do they do with the Jeffrey Jones problem in this movie? Because most of the story hinges on the fact that this guy just died. And honestly, if that was the storyline, I wouldn't have a problem with it. The character in the movie is not the bad guy. It's the guy that played him in real life that is a bad person. So, okay, the movie opens with a shark attack happened and he is now dead. And so the movie moves on. And I would have been totally fine with that, except for the fact that they use his face and his likeness throughout the bulk of this movie. Like, okay, at the beginning of the movie, you see the incident actually happen, but they do it in Tim Burton claymation style, which I was kind of iffy on because I was like, okay, technically they're not using the actor. It looks like the guy from the movie. Maybe that'll be fine. All right, fine. They did it. Whatever. And then that character shows up through the movie in the underworld, but of course is missing his head. And so you're like, all right, that makes sense because you don't want to show the actor's face, right? Right? No. They're going to show the actor's face so many times throughout this movie. At the funeral, they show his face. At the wake, they show his face. On his headstone, many times throughout the movie, they show the actor's face. And I have a problem with that. Now listen, you may not have had a problem with that. I've had people tell me, it didn't really bother me. And that's okay. That's totally fine. But keep in mind, this is my video and these are my negatives. And so my biggest negative for this film is putting that piece of human garbage in your film at all. You should not have used his face at all. And what grosses me out even more is I can only imagine that they had to pay this guy to use his face in this movie. Maybe if the claymation portion, they didn't have to use him, but having to use his face throughout this film, I can only imagine he got a paycheck for that. And I feel gross buying a ticket to this movie knowing that this guy got paid for this movie. It's just gross to me. So I don't know why Tim Burton included his face at all. I think you could have done away with that. I think that the way that they handled his character in the afterlife was fine. You bit his head off. You didn't have the actor's face. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with the claymation portion. I'm like, fine, you had to find a way to do it. Fine. But to show his face, the actor's face, Jeffrey Jones' face, the predator, you had to show his face throughout this film, just made me feel gross anytime they did it, and they did it a lot. So that is a huge negative for me. But with that out of the way, I will calm down a little bit, and I will say that overall, I am glad Tim Burton got to come back and make a sequel to his original film. I liked that Michael Keaton got to reprise his role, Winona Ryder got to reprise her role, Catherine O'Hara coming back, some of the newer faces to the Beetlejuice franchise, like Willem Dafoe Dafoe and Jenna Ortega. I thought it was fun seeing them in this movie as well. And would I recommend this movie to you? Well, for me, it's a one and done. But I will say that I think if you're a huge fan of that original Beetlejuice movie, you'll probably enjoy this film and you may want to go watch it on the big screen. But I would probably recommend just wait for it at home. It's going to be streaming in October, so you can probably rent it then. If you want to watch it around Halloween, you can watch it from your own home. But as always, guys, those are just my opinions because that's my review for Beetlejuice. Guys, if you had a chance to see this movie yet, if you have, let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know what you liked about it, what you didn't like. Maybe we agree on the positives or disagree on some of the negatives, and that's okay. All film is subjective, except for the fact that Jeffrey Jones is a predator and should not be around other humans. With that said, if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Alright guys, we got to the end of my Beetlejuice review, and I had a good time watching this movie, had a better time making this review. I love making these reviews for you guys, going back and forth in the comment section. But until my next review, if you want to check out any of the other content on my channel, well, I've got all of my best and worst of 2024 right there, and I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.